The cowboy noticed her shadow thin frame through the dining room window of the ranch house, her hollow cheeks catching the lamplight while her husband carved into a thick ribeye steak at the table alone. Xander Hayes had ridden 3 days from Amarillo to Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the summer of 1882, delivering a prize stallion to the wealthy rancher Marcus Caldwell, and what he witnessed through that window made his blood run cold in a way no outlaw ever had. He stood there in the dust of the yard, his leather gloves still clutched in one hand, watching as the woman, Mrs. Caldwell, he presumed, emerged from the kitchen carrying a silver coffee pot. She refilled her husband's cup with trembling hands, her wrists so thin they looked like they might snap under the weight of the pot. Marcus did not look up, did not acknowledge her presence, just continued eating with the focused intensity of a man who believed the world existed to serve him. The woman backed away toward the kitchen, and Xander caught sight of her profile. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that only emphasized the gauntness of her face. Her dress hung loose on her frame, and when she turned, he saw her press a hand to her stomach as if trying to silence its complaints. Xander stepped back from the window, his jaw tight. He had seen many injustices in his 26 years: claim jumpers, cattle thieves, men who beat their horses, but there was something particularly cruel about watching a man feast while his wife starved. He made his way to the bunkhouse where Caldwell had told him to spend the night before collecting his payment in the morning, but sleep would not come. The image of that woman's hollow eyes haunted him. Morning broke hot and bright over the New Mexico territory. Xander rose early, washed at the pump, and made his way to the main house. He knocked firmly on the door, and it was she who answered. Up close, her condition was even more apparent. Her green eyes were ringed with dark circles, her lips cracked and pale. But there was something else there too, a flicker of spirit that had not quite been extinguished, a backbone of steel beneath the frail exterior. "Yes." Her voice was soft but steady. "Morning, madam. I am here to see Mr. Caldwell about my payment for the stallion. He is still abed." "You may wait in the parlor." She stepped aside, and he noticed how carefully she moved, as if conserving every ounce of energy. Xander entered the dim parlor with its heavy curtains and expensive furniture. Everything spoke of wealth, from the Persian rug beneath his boots to the oil paintings on the walls. The woman disappeared toward the kitchen, and after a moment, he followed the sound of her movements. She stood at the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal, and beside it sat a platter with 6 eggs, bacon, sausages, and fresh biscuits clearly being prepared for her husband. "That is quite a breakfast," Xander said from the doorway. She startled, nearly dropping the wooden spoon. "Mr. Caldwell requires a substantial morning meal." "And what about you, Mrs. Caldwell? What do you require?" Her back stiffened. "I have what I need." "Do you?" He stepped into the kitchen, his voice gentle but insistent. "Forgive my boldness, madam, but I have eyes. I saw you last night, and I see you now. When did you last have a proper meal?" Her hand trembled on the spoon. For a long moment she said nothing, then her shoulders sagged slightly. "My husband believes that a woman of refinement should maintain a delicate figure. He monitors my portions carefully. He says it is for my own good that I must learn discipline. Discipline." Xander felt anger coiling in his gut. "Madam, that is not discipline. That is cruelty. You do not understand. Marcus knows best." "He has always," her voice cracked, and she pressed her lips together. Before Xander could respond, heavy footsteps sounded from above. Marcus Caldwell was awake. The woman's entire demeanor changed, her spine going rigid, her movements becoming quick and precise as she plated the enormous breakfast. Xander stepped back into the parlor, his mind working. Marcus Caldwell descended the stairs in a silk dressing gown, his substantial belly preceding him. He was perhaps 45, with thinning hair and the ruddy complexion of a man who indulged freely. He barely glanced at Xander. "Hayes, your money is in my office. Come." Xander followed him down a hallway lined with hunting trophies. In the office, Caldwell counted out bills with thick fingers, then pushed them across the desk. "There, our business is concluded. Actually, Mr. Caldwell, I was hoping you might need a foreman. I have experience with cattle, horses, and ranch management." Caldwell looked up, surprised. "I have a foreman. But I heard in town that old Pete is retiring soon. I could start as a hand, work my way up. I am a hard worker and I know the land." Caldwell studied him for a long moment. "The work is brutal. 12-hour days minimum. I have handled worse." Something in Caldwell's eyes suggested he liked the idea of having another man to order around. $50 a month, bunk and board. You start today." "Agreed." Xander shook his hand, though it made his skin crawl. Over the following weeks, Xander learned the rhythms of the Caldwell ranch. He worked alongside the other hands, 5 rough but decent men who avoided the main house as much as possible. But Xander found reasons to be near it. To cross paths with the woman he now knew was named Lorelei Caldwell. Her maiden name had been Carter, and she had married Marcus 3 years ago when her father died and left her penniless. It had not been a love match but a transaction, a business arrangement that had trapped her in a gilded cage. He began leaving things for her, a canteen of cool water near the garden where she tended the vegetables, a basket of apples from the orchard placed on the kitchen step early in the morning, fresh bread he bought in town tucked inside the pantry when he knew Marcus was away. At first she ignored these offerings, fear written clearly on her face. But hunger was a powerful thing, and eventually he caught her slipping an apple into her pocket, glancing around nervously before biting into it with desperate urgency. One evening, he found her in the barn. She had come to check on a sick calf, or so she said, but he suspected she simply needed a moment away from the suffocating atmosphere of the house. The sun was setting, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and purple. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and in the golden light he saw a hint of color in her cheeks that had not been there before. The hidden food was helping. "Mr. Hayes, I did not hear you come in. I wanted to check on the calf myself." He moved to the stall, examining the small creature. "He is looking better." "Yes," she hesitated, then spoke in a rush. "I know it has been you, the food, the water. I should tell you to stop. Marcus would be furious if he knew, but I—" Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I am so hungry all the time. I dream about food. I wake up and my stomach hurts so badly I can barely stand." Xander's hands clenched into fists. "How long has he been doing this to you?" "Since the beginning. At first he simply suggested I eat less. Then he began choosing my portions. Then he started locking the pantry at night. He says a wife should be elegant, ethereal, not coarse and common. He says if I truly loved him, I would want to be beautiful for him." "You are starving. That is not love, Lorelei." It was the first time he had used her given name, and her eyes widened. The air between them seemed to shift, to charge with something neither had intended but both felt. "I should go," she whispered, but she did not move. "I will not stop leaving food for you," Xander said firmly. "If he catches me, that is my concern, but I will not stand by and watch you fade away." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why do you care? You do not even know me." "I know enough." He took a step closer, then stopped himself. "I know you are kind, because you tend sick calves and water the plants even when you can barely stand. I know you are strong, because you have survived 3 years of this and you are still here, still fighting. and I know that you deserve better than a man who uses food as a weapon." She covered her face with her hands, her thin shoulders shaking. Xander ached to comfort her, but he knew the impropriety, the danger. Instead, he said quietly, "You are not alone, Lorelei, not anymore." She looked up at him, and something passed between them, recognition, connection, the first fragile thread of something that might become hope. The summer heat intensified, and with it, tensions on the ranch. Marcus grew increasingly irritable, barking orders and finding fault with everything. He seemed to sense something had shifted, though he could not pinpoint what. He began watching his wife more closely, timing her trips to the garden, checking the pantry inventory, questioning her about every moment of her day. In response, Xander became more careful, more creative. He taught Lorelei where he would hide food under a loose board in the barn, in a hollow of an old cottonwood tree by the creek, inside an unused feed sack in the tack room. They developed a system of subtle signals. A certain curtain left open meant Marcus would be gone to town the next day. A bucket placed by the well meant she needed to speak with him urgently. They were careful never to be alone together for long, never to give Marcus cause for suspicion, but the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Late one night, Xander was awoken by frantic knocking on the bunkhouse door. He grabbed his pistol and found Lorelei standing in the darkness, her nightgown billowing around her thin frame, her face streaked with tears. "He knows," she gasped. "He found the bread in the pantry. He accused me of stealing from him, of defying him. He said," she choked on a sob, "he said he is going to start locking me in the bedroom at night, that he will personally oversee every bite I eat, that he will break me of my disobedience." Xander pulled her inside, away from the prying darkness. The other men were away, driving cattle to summer pasture, and the bunkhouse was empty save for them. "You cannot go back there." "I have no choice. I have nowhere else to go, no money, no family. You have me." The words came out with an intensity that surprised them both. Xander set down the pistol and took her hands, so small and cold, in his. "Lorelei, I have been a fool to wait this long. I should have said something sooner, should have acted weeks ago. But I am saying it now. Come with me. Leave him. We will ride out tonight, head to Albuquerque or even Denver. I have money saved. We can start over. He will come after us. Marcus does not let go of what he considers his property. Then let him come. I am not afraid of him." Xander lifted her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "I know this is fast. I know we have not spoken of feelings, not properly. But Lorelei, these weeks of knowing you have changed something in me. I care for you. More than care. I think I am falling in love with you, and I cannot stand by and watch him destroy you." Fresh tears spilled down her face, but these were different, tinged with something that might have been joy. "I feel it too. I thought I was going mad, feeling this way about a man I barely know. But Xander, you have shown me more kindness in these few weeks than Marcus has in 3 years. You have saved my life. How could I not fall in love with you?" He pulled her into his arms, feeling how fragile she was, how much healing she would need. But beneath the frailness, he felt her heart beating strong and steady, felt her arms wrap around him with surprising strength. She was a survivor, a fighter, and together they would be stronger still. "We leave tonight," he said firmly. "Pack only what you can carry. I will saddle 2 horses. We will be miles away before he wakes." But fate had other plans. Even as they stood there, the door crashed open and Marcus Caldwell filled the frame, his face purple with rage, a shotgun in his hands. "I knew it," he snarled. "I knew there was someone. You faithless, ungrateful creature, after everything I have given you." Lorelei stepped in front of Xander. "Given me? You have given me nothing but misery and hunger. You have treated me worse than you treat your livestock. You are my wife. I have every right to discipline you as I see fit." "No man has the right to starve another human being," Xander said, his voice deadly calm. "Put down the gun, Caldwell. You have defiled my wife, corrupted her, turned her against me. I should kill you both. Your wife was dying when I arrived. I gave her food, nothing more. If that is corruption, then yes, I am guilty." Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Food. You think this is about food? This is about obedience, about respect, about a woman knowing her place. She was perfect when I found her meek, desperate, grateful, and you have ruined her." Something in Lorelei snapped. "I was never perfect, Marcus. I was broken, scared. But Xander has shown me that I deserve more than crumbs from your table, more than the scraps of affection you toss my way when it suits you. I am leaving. You can shoot us both, but I am not staying in that house another night." The shotgun wavered. For a moment, Xander thought Marcus might actually pull the trigger. His hand moved to his own pistol, still lying on the table behind him. But then voices called out in the yard, the ranch hands returning early from the pasture, drawn by the commotion. Marcus lowered the gun slowly, his face contorting. "Fine. Leave. But you leave with nothing, no clothes, no money, nothing. And I will make sure everyone in Santa Fe knows what you are, an adulteress who ran off with a ranch hand. You will be ruined, both of you." "I would rather be ruined with Xander than spend another day in luxury with you," Lorelei said, her voice ringing clear and strong. They left that night under a canopy of stars, riding north with only the clothes on their backs and the money in Xander's saddlebags. Lorelei had never sat a horse for more than an hour, but she gritted her teeth and endured, clinging to the saddle horn as they put mile after mile between themselves and the Caldwell ranch. They stopped at dawn near a creek, and Xander helped her down, catching her when her legs buckled. "I am sorry," she gasped. "I am not usually so weak. You are recovering from 3 years of slow starvation. You are allowed to be tired." He spread out a bedroll in the shade of a juniper tree and helped her lie down. From his pack he produced jerky, hardtack, and a canteen of water. "Small amounts, frequently. Your stomach needs time to adjust." She ate slowly, savoring each bite with an expression of such pure bliss that it made his heart ache. "I never thought food could taste this good. Everything tastes better when it is freely given." He sat beside her, his hand finding hers. "Rest now. We have a long journey ahead." They traveled for 3 weeks, moving steadily north and east toward Colorado. Xander was careful to keep them off main roads, knowing Marcus might send men after them or alert the law with false accusations. They camped under the stars, forded rivers, and crossed stretches of empty prairie where the only sound was the wind moving through the grass. With each passing day, Lorelei grew stronger. Color returned to her cheeks. Her hands stopped shaking. She began to smile tentatively at first, then more frequently, until Xander found himself doing foolish things just to hear her laugh. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives. Xander told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, losing his parents to influenza when he was 18, spending years drifting from town to town before ending up in New Mexico. Lorelei spoke of her childhood in St. Louis, her father's business failures, the slow descent into poverty that had ended with her accepting Marcus's proposal out of sheer desperation. "I thought I was so practical," she said one night as they sat by the campfire. "I thought love was a luxury I could not afford, but now I realize I was just afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of starving, afraid of dying unmourned and forgotten." "You will never be alone again," Xander promised, "and you will never go hungry, I swear it." She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, marveling at how right it felt. "What will we do when we reach Denver? I have a friend there, a man I rode with years ago. He owns a livery stable and has been after me for years to come work for him. We can stay with him until we get on our feet and then—" He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Lorelei, I know we have not known each other long. I know the circumstances have been strange. But when we get to Denver, when you are feeling stronger and more yourself, I would like to court you properly. Take you to dinner, walk with you in the park, all the things we should have done before circumstances forced our hand. And then," she asked softly, "and then, if you will have me, I would like to marry you, build a life together. Maybe buy our own piece of land someday, raise horses, have children if God wills it." He turned to look at her, firelight dancing in his eyes. "I love you, Lorelei. I know I have said it before, but I need you to understand this is not about rescuing you or some misguided sense of duty. I love your strength, your kindness, your courage. I love the way you sing to the horses when you think I am not listening. I love the way you watch the sunrise like it is a gift meant just for you. I love you, all of you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since that day in the barn when you told me I was not alone. You gave me hope when I had none, food when I was starving, freedom when I was imprisoned. How could I not love you?" He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, pouring all his feelings into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "We should probably wait until we reach Denver," she said with a shaky laugh. "Do things properly, as you said." "Probably," he agreed, but neither of them moved, content to sit there in the firelight, wrapped in each other's arms, dreaming of the future. They arrived in Denver in late August. The city was bustling with activity, a strange contrast to the empty plains they had crossed. Xander's friend, Jack Morrison, welcomed them with open arms and no questions asked. He was a burly man with a thick beard and a booming laugh, and he immediately took a liking to Lorelei. "About time you settled down, Hayes," Jack said, clapping Xander on the back. "You have been roaming too long. A woman like this will keep you grounded." They stayed in a small room above the livery, and Xander took to the work with enthusiasm. He was good with horses, patient, firm, understanding. Word spread quickly, and soon people were bringing their most difficult animals to him. The money was not extravagant, but it was steady, and for the first time in his life, Xander felt like he was building toward something real. Lorelei blossomed in Denver. With regular meals and safety, she gained weight, her hair grew lustrous, and her eyes sparkled with life. She took a job at a dress shop, using skills she had learned as a girl to alter and repair garments. The shop owner, Mrs. Adelaide Werner, was a kind woman who did not pry into Lorelei's past, but offered friendship and support. 6 months after arriving in Denver, on a cold February morning in 1883, Xander took Lorelei to breakfast at a small restaurant. Over eggs and coffee, he reached across the table and took her hand. "You told me once you thought love was a luxury you could not afford. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that wrong, showing you every day that you are cherished and valued and precious beyond measure. Lorelei Carter, will you marry me?" He produced a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but the expression on Lorelei's face suggested he had offered her all the treasures of the world. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a small church on the outskirts of Denver. Jack stood up as Xander's best man, and Mrs. Werner served as Lorelei's matron of honor. It was a simple ceremony, but it was filled with joy and hope, and the kind of love that comes from truly knowing and choosing each other. Their wedding night was spent in a small but clean hotel room. Xander was gentle and patient, mindful of everything Lorelei had endured. She had confessed to him during their journey that her marriage to Marcus had been cold and perfunctory, something to be endured rather than enjoyed. Xander made it his mission to show her that intimacy could be beautiful, that her body was not something to be starved and controlled but celebrated and cherished. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the lamplight, Lorelei traced patterns on his chest. "I feel like I have lived 3 lifetimes. The girl I was before Marcus, the ghost I became during those 3 years, and now the woman I am with you. It is like being born again." "You were always this woman," Xander said, kissing her forehead. "She was just buried under layers of hurt and hunger. I am honored to have helped her emerge." "We helped each other," Lorelei corrected. "You were drifting before we met, rootless and alone. Now look at us building a life, making a home. We saved each other, Xander." He could not argue with that. They spent a year in Denver, saving every penny they could. Jack offered to make Xander a partner in the livery, but Xander had a different dream. He wanted land of his own, space to breathe and grow, a place where he and Lorelei could raise a family far from the shadows of the past. In the spring of 1884, they founded a small ranch about 30 miles outside Denver, in the foothills where the plains met the mountains. It was modest, just 100 acres with a stream running through it, a barn that needed repairs, and a house that was more cabin than mansion. But it was theirs, purchased with their combined savings and a small loan from Jack. They moved in on a bright May morning, and Lorelei stood in the doorway of their new home with tears streaming down her face. "It is perfect," she whispered. "It needs work," Xander said practically, but he was grinning. "It is ours. That makes it perfect." They threw themselves into the work of making the ranch viable. Xander bought a small herd of horses, breeding stock with good lines. Lorelei planted a garden that quickly became the envy of their few neighbors' vegetables, herbs, flowers that brought color and life to the dusty yard. They fixed the roof, patched the walls, built new fences, and slowly but surely transformed the property into a real home. In October of that year, Lorelei told Xander she was expecting a child. He whooped with joy and spun her around in the kitchen, then immediately set her down and apologized for being too rough. She laughed and kissed him, her hands cradling his face. "I am not made of glass, you know. I am stronger than I look, I know. But you and this baby are the most precious things in my world. I cannot help but want to protect you." Their son was born in June of 1885, a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and his mother's green eyes. They named him James, after Xander's father, and from the moment Xander held that tiny, squirming bundle, he felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Lorelei was a natural mother, attentive but not smothering, firm but loving. And she ate well, making sure she had the strength and nourishment to care for their son. Xander would sometimes catch her in the kitchen, nursing James while eating fresh bread and honey, and the contentment on her face was a stark contrast to the haunted woman he had first seen through that window in Santa Fe. One evening, when James was about 6 months old, Xander found Lorelei standing on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him. "You ever think about him?" she asked quietly. "About Marcus, about that life?" "Sometimes," Xander admitted. "Do you?" "Yes, not because I miss it, but because it feels like it happened to someone else, like it was a story I read, not something I lived through." She turned in his arms to face him. "I heard from Mrs. Werner last month. She has a cousin in Santa Fe who writes to her occasionally. Apparently, Marcus remarried last year another young woman, another desperate situation. I wanted to warn her, to tell her to run, but I did not know how. What if she does not believe me? What if it makes things worse for her?" Xander's jaw tightened. Men like Marcus never change. But Lorelei, you cannot save everyone. You saved yourself, and that took incredible courage. If this new wife ever needs help, if she ever asks for it, then maybe we can do something. But you cannot carry that burden. I know. It just makes me angry, thinking of him doing to someone else what he did to me. Then, let that anger fuel your compassion. Be kind to the women you meet. Share your story when it feels right. Make this ranch a place where people know they can find help if they need it. That is how you fight men like Marcus, by creating something better, something full of love and light. She smiled up at him. When did you become so wise? I learned it from you. 2 years later, their daughter was born, a tiny, fierce little thing they named Ruth after Lorelai's mother. James was a doting big brother, constantly wanting to hold her, to show her his toys, to protect her from every imagined danger. The house filled with laughter and chaos, and the beautiful mess of family life. The ranch prospered. Xander's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people traveled from as far as Colorado Springs to buy his animals or seek his expertise. Lorelai's garden expanded to include fruit trees and berry bushes, and she began selling preserves and dried herbs at the market in town. They hired a young man named Tom to help with the heavier ranch work, and he became like family, eating dinner with them most nights and playing with the children. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Xander surprised Lorelai with a piano, a beautiful upright that he had saved for over a year to afford. She had mentioned once, years ago, that she had played as a child, and he had never forgotten. "Xander, this is too much," she protested, but her fingers were already reaching for the keys. "Nothing is too much for you. Play something." Her hands were rusty at first, stumbling over the keys, but muscle memory returned. Soon the house filled with music, and James and Ruth danced wildly in the center of the room while Tom clapped along. Xander stood in the doorway, watching his wife and children, and felt such overwhelming gratitude that he had to blink back tears. This was what he had fought for. This was what that night in the bunkhouse had been about, not just saving Lorelai from a cruel man, but creating space for this kind of joy, this kind of love, this kind of life. As the years passed, the Hayes Ranch became known throughout the region as a place of integrity and kindness. Travelers knew they could stop there for a meal and a place to sleep without fear of being turned away. Women fleeing bad situations heard through whispered networks that Lorelai Hayes had once been where they were, and that she would help if she could. More than once, a desperate woman appeared at their door in the middle of the night, and Lorelai took her in without hesitation, feeding her, clothing her, helping her figure out her next steps. Xander never complained about the extra mouths to feed or the complications these visitors sometimes brought. He had been raised to believe that a man's worth was measured by his strength and his willingness to use it to protect those who could not protect themselves. Every woman they helped, every life they touched, was a repudiation of Marcus Caldwell and men like him. In the summer of 1892, a letter arrived addressed to Mrs. Lorelai Hayes. It bore a Santa Fe postmark, and Lorelai's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a brief note from a lawyer, informing her that Marcus Caldwell had died of a heart attack 3 months prior. His estate was being divided, and as his first wife, she was entitled to claim abandonment damages under territorial law if she wished to pursue the matter. Lorelai read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in the stove. "I do not want his money," she told Xander. "I do not want anything that ties me to him. That part of my life is over, and I want it to stay that way. Are you sure? That money could help a lot of people." She considered this, then shook her head. "Let his current wife have it, or his children if he has any. My life is here with you and James and Ruth and this ranch. I do not need anything from my past." Xander pulled her into his arms. "I love you, Lorelai Hayes. Have I told you that today?" Only 3 times. You are slacking. He laughed and kissed her, this woman who had survived starvation and cruelty and emerged stronger and kinder and more beautiful than ever. She kissed him back with the passion of a woman who knew the value of love freely given, who understood that every day was a gift, who had learned to savor joy the way she had once savored stolen apples. Their 3rd child, a daughter named Grace, was born in 1893. She had Xander's dark hair and Lorelai's stubborn spirit, and from the moment she could walk, she was following her father around the ranch, demanding to help with everything. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the garden grew larger every year. They added chickens, a few dairy cows, and eventually a small herd of cattle to supplement the horse breeding. James grew into a serious, thoughtful young man with his mother's compassion and his father's steady nature. He wanted to be a veterinarian, and Xander and Lorelai saved to send him to school in Denver when the time came. Ruth was artistic, always drawing or painting, seeing beauty in ordinary things. Grace was the adventurer, the one who climbed trees and caught snakes, and declared she was going to be a cowboy like her papa. On a warm evening in the fall of 1899, the entire family gathered on the porch after dinner. James was home from his studies, 17 now and nearly as tall as his father. Ruth was 14, showing her parents her latest sketches. Grace, at 6, sat on Xander's lap, chattering about the foal that had been born that morning. Lorelai sat in her rocking chair, her hands busy with mending, a smile playing at her lips as she listened to the comfortable chaos of her family. Xander caught her eye over Grace's head, and the look they exchanged spoke volumes. This was what they had built, not just a ranch or a house, but a legacy of love and kindness and resilience. Children who knew they were cherished, who understood the importance of standing up for what was right, who had never once gone to bed hungry or unloved. "Mama," Grace said suddenly, "tell us the story about how you and Papa met." Lorelai and Xander exchanged another glance. Their children knew the broad strokes, that their mother had been unhappy in her first marriage, that their father had helped her leave, that they had fallen in love and built this life together. But they had never shared the full truth, the darker details of starvation and cruelty. "Well," Lorelai began, setting aside her mending, "your father was the bravest man I had ever met. He saw that I needed help and he did not look away. He did not tell himself it was not his business or that he should not get involved. He saw an injustice and he ended it." "Like a hero in a storybook," Grace said dreamily. "Better than a storybook hero," Lorelai corrected gently. "Because he was real, and what he did was not easy or simple. It cost him his job and put us both in danger. But he did it anyway because it was right." "I was not trying to be heroic," Xander said, bouncing Grace on his knee. "I just could not stand by and watch someone suffer when I had the power to help." "That is exactly what makes you a hero, Papa," James said quietly. "Doing the right thing even when it is hard." Ruth looked up from her sketches. "Mama, are you glad you left? Even though it was scary, every single day," Lorelai said without hesitation. "Because leaving led me here, to this ranch, to your father, to all of you. Life is not always easy, and there are still days when I remember how difficult those times were. But I would go through it all again if I knew this was waiting on the other side." As the sun set behind the mountains and the stars began to emerge, the family sat together in comfortable silence. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied. In the distance, an owl hooted. The night air carried the scent of pine and prairie grass, and the sound of the creek babbling over stones provided a gentle soundtrack to the evening. Xander looked at his wife, at the life they had created together, and felt a profound sense of peace. He thought about that night 17 years ago when he had stood outside a ranch house window and witnessed cruelty that he could not ignore. He had made a choice in that moment to get involved, to care, to act. That choice had changed the course of both their lives, had set in motion a chain of events that had led to this porch, these children, this beautiful, imperfect, love-filled life. Lorelei caught him staring and raised an eyebrow in question. He just smiled and shook his head, not needing words to communicate what he was feeling. After all these years, she could read him as easily as he could read her. She smiled back, that radiant smile that still took his breath away, and returned her attention to the children. Later that night, after the children had been tucked into bed and the house had quieted, Xander and Lorelei stood at their bedroom window, looking out over the ranch they had built together. His arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, fitting perfectly into his embrace. "You remember," she said softly, "that night in the bunkhouse when you asked me to run away with you? I was so terrified. Not of leaving Marcus, but of trusting you, of believing that something good could actually happen to me. I remember. I was terrified too. What if I could not protect you? What if I was leading you into something worse? But you did protect me. You gave me a life beyond anything I had ever dreamed possible. You gave me love and children and a home and safety. You gave me the chance to become the woman I was meant to be." He turned her in his arms so he could see her face in the moonlight. "We gave those things to each other, Lorelei. I was lost before I met you, drifting without purpose. You gave my life meaning. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. Everything good in my life started the day I saw you through that window." She reached up to cup his face, her thumb tracing the lines that time and weather had etched around his eyes. "Then I am glad you looked. I am glad you did not turn away. I am glad you were brave enough to care. I will always care. In this life and whatever comes after, I will always love you, Lorelei Hayes. And I will always love you, Xander Hayes, my hero, my partner, my heart." They kissed then, a kiss that held 17 years of love and trust and partnership, a kiss that promised 17 more and beyond. Outside, the ranch slept peacefully under the stars, the horses safe in their pasture, the garden thriving, the house full of the dreams of children who knew they were loved. It was not the life either of them had imagined when they were young. It was better, richer, deeper, more meaningful than anything they could have planned. Because it was built on a foundation of choosing each other every single day, of facing hardships together and emerging stronger, of turning pain into compassion and fear into courage. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. James graduated from veterinary school and returned to Colorado, opening a practice in a town 50 miles away. He married a schoolteacher named Anna, and they gave Xander and Lorelei their first grandchild, a boy they named Xander James, carrying on the family name. Ruth's artistic talents earned her a scholarship to an art school in Denver. She studied and traveled and eventually returned home, using her skills to teach art to children in the local school. She married a fellow teacher, a gentle man named Thomas who loved her fierce independence and creative spirit. Grace, true to her childhood declarations, became a rancher. She took over more and more of the daily operations as Xander's joints began to ache with age and Lorelei's eyesight dimmed. Grace married late, choosing a cowboy named William who respected her capabilities and treated her as an equal partner. Together they expanded the ranch, adding acreage and building a small guest house for travelers who needed refuge. In the summer of 1915, Xander and Lorelei celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. They were both in their 50s now, weathered by sun and wind but still strong, still healthy, still deeply in love. The ranch was thriving under Grace and William's management, and the house regularly overflowed with grandchildren, 7 so far, with more on the way. They marked the occasion with a simple dinner, just the two of them, in the same restaurant where Xander had proposed all those years ago. The city of Denver had grown around it, but the restaurant remained, a constant in a changing world. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not stopped at the Caldwell ranch that day?" Xander asked, his hand finding hers across the table as it always did. "Sometimes," Lorelei admitted, "but not often. What is the point in dwelling on paths not taken? This is the path we chose together, and I would not change a single step. Not even the hard parts, especially not the hard parts. They taught us how strong we could be. They made the good times sweeter." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, if none of that had happened, we would not have James and Ruth and Grace. We would not have this beautiful life we have built. Every struggle was worth it." Xander raised his glass in a toast, to struggles that make us stronger, to choices that change everything, to love that endures. "To us," Lorelei added, clinking her glass against his. "Always and forever to us." They lived long, full lives, those two souls who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1923, at the age of 67, Lorelei beside him holding his hand. She followed him 6 years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them proof that love, real love, creates ripples that extend far beyond a single lifetime. The Hayes Ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose courage over fear, compassion over cruelty, and love over everything else. And though the story of how it all began of a cowboy who looked through a window and saw an injustice he could not ignore, of a woman who found the strength to choose freedom over security, of a love that bloomed in the unlikeliest of circumstances, that story was passed down through the years, told and retold around dinner tables and campfires. It became family legend, the kind of story that children begged to hear over and over, that inspired teenagers to believe in true love, that reminded adults what really mattered in life. Because at its heart, it was a story about seeing another person suffering and deciding to do something about it, about finding love in unexpected places, about building something beautiful from the ashes of pain and fear. It was, in the end, a very simple story. A cowboy saw a woman starving while her husband feasted. The cowboy ended that arrangement forever. And in doing so, he saved not just her life but his own, creating a legacy of love and compassion that would echo through generations. A bright thread of hope woven into the fabric of the West, proving that even in the hardest times, in the roughest places, love could take root and flourish and transform everything it touched.